Adultery does not begin in the bedroom. It begins when a person stops being sacred and becomes consumable. We live in a culture that says if you desire it, you deserve it. And Jesus says that that mindset will destroy you because the moment you consume people for your own gratification, you stop loving them. What if Jesus wasn't just trying to stop adultery? What if he was confronting a broken way of being human and inviting us into a new way of being human? Welcome to Thinking Aloud. We're in a series right now on the Sermon on the Mount where we are following Jesus into a new way of being human. And you can catch the previous episodes where we've talked about the Beatitudes and salt and light. And today we're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 5, starting with verse 27. But I want to give a little bit of context here. Who is Jesus speaking to when he talks about adultery? Well, Jesus was speaking to a mixed audience of men and women living under Roman oppression with the law of Moses as the centerpiece of their society. A man could send his wife away with little cause, leaving her socially and economically vulnerable. And there were two schools of thought back then. There was Shammai. He was a rabbi that had one thought, and Hillel had another thought. And we see later in the Gospels that Jesus is brought into this argument between these two rabbis. But the next thing that we see and understand is that women were under the authority of their husbands or their fathers, and their primary role was to bear children, manage the household, support the husband's social and economic standing, and fulfill the husband's needs. And Jesus's audience would have heard what we're about to read as being shockingly pro-dignity for women. Now, in our current American culture, we cannot fathom women being second-class citizens like that. And I'm glad that they're not. I believe that women should be treated with dignity and respect and should be valued every bit as much as a man should. There is no, there shouldn't be no unequalness between the two. When a woman does the same job as a man, she should get the same pay. There's a controversy right now going on with the Southern Baptist Church where the Southern Baptist Convention has come out and said that women cannot be preachers or elders in the church. I don't believe that. I believe that women can be preachers, elders, and pastors and leaders within the church. But that's not the topic of this. But we do see, and we're going to see, how Jesus elevated the status of women in a society that did not elevate them. So let's take a look at the first two verses. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, there are some Christians that don't believe, they do not believe that the Sermon on the Mount is for current day Christians living under the new covenant. They believe it was for the Jews of that time. I personally believe that we can learn a lot from the Sermon on the Mount, and it's certainly applicable to us today. And Jesus is saying to these people, his fellow Jews that were living under the Mosaic law, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. So there were many that thought, hey, I've never physically committed adultery. I'm all right. But Jesus takes it a step further and he says, look, you may not have committed a physical act, but if you've lusted after a woman, you've committed adultery in your heart. See, Jesus moves past the physical act of adultery to the heart behind it, which is lust, the reduction of another person as an object. And in his day, this targeted men who held the power. But today, I believe that it applies to men and women equally. Because in our society, I believe that men and women can lust equally, and we see it happen. We see women being just as aggressive sexually these days as men have been throughout the centuries. And lust is not just a male problem because our culture normalizes desire as consumption for everyone. It's amazing to me that women are addicted to pornography, that number has been growing. We have hookup apps where people get together for just one night stands. They don't know one another, but they get together for a one night stand. And if you look at our advertising, most of our advertising is that is geared towards men always has some woman that's either scantily clad or looks very seductive because it sells. Sex sells in our culture. Now, I believe that as followers of Jesus, we are to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And that's what Jesus is saying. He's telling his audience and us, you may not commit the physical act, but if it's in your heart, you might as well. If it's in your heart, you've already done it. And so what I want us to do is understand what real purity is. Now, if you grew up in the 90s like I did, I was a youth pastor in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about purity culture. And, true love waits, and I Kiss Dating Goodbye. And if you remember any of that, you know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not going back to that. I'm not going back to a shame-based teaching. But I do believe that as followers of Jesus, we are called to be pure. We are called to see people as image bearers and not consumable objects. And that's what lust does. Lust turns things into consumable objects. And when we lust after people, they become a consumable object for our desires. And as followers of Jesus, we're called to live to a higher standard than that. Now, if you fall, if you have fallen, if you have committed adultery, there's no shame. I'm not here to shame you. I'm not here to judge you or condemn you. I'm here saying that Jesus is giving us a new way to be human where everyone is treated with dignity as an image bearer of God. And so Jesus tells us here that if we're going to be pure in heart, then it requires a radical action. Let's look at verse 29 and 30. Jesus says, if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Now, one point I want to make here is that Jesus actually would have used the word Gehenna, which the people would have understood as a place of judgment. If your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you, for it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into Gehenna. Now, here's something that I find very interesting. A lot of evangelical Christians tell people we need to take the Bible literally. But this is one place that they won't take the Bible literally. I don't see any Christian walking around with their eye gouged out or their right hand cut off. And yet, I know that many Christian men struggle with pornography. Many Christian men have struggled with lust. Many Christian women have struggled with it. And we don't see them poking their eyes out or cutting their hands off. Jesus is using hyperbole. And if we're going to use that here and understand that's what he's using here, then we also have to understand that it's possible that we use that in other places in Scripture where we learn not to take everything literally. So in this passage, Jesus' hyperbole about removing their eyes or their hands underlines an urgency and a seriousness about sin. Don't negotiate with it, eliminate it. Jesus is saying here, look, if your right hand is causing you to stumble, if your right eye is causing you to lust, gouge it out. He's saying, don't negotiate with it, get urgent about it. Do whatever you can to get rid of it in your life. Back then, men had to take responsibility. This is what Jesus is telling them to do. Take responsibility instead of blaming women. But even in our culture today, unfortunately, whenever women are sexually abused, there are still people that say, well, she must have done something to deserve it, or she must have done something to cause it. Listen, that is not true. Anytime somebody sexually abuses somebody else, it's the abuser's fault. They should exercise self-control, especially Christians. And we are seeing ministers being exposed left and right, it seems, for abusing people that follow them sexually. We're seeing ministers lose their ministries, rightfully so, because they sexually abused women in their ministry. But I also believe that now, in our current culture, that both genders must take ownership for boundaries and the choices that they make. And so sometimes we need to take radical action here if we're going to keep our lives pure, untainted by sin and lust and greed. And that might mean deleting certain apps or setting digital boundaries or practicing accountability. Now, when I say accountability, for me, that's a trigger word, because I've been through the accountability movement. I've been through Promise Keepers. I've been through all that stuff. And here's the bottom line. Accountability doesn't work unless the person being held accountable wants to be held accountable. If I ask my best friend or my wife or, my best, guy friend or my wife or another minister that I trust, if I ask them, hey, I want you to keep me accountable, that's only as good as I'm willing to tell them the truth. It's only as good as I'm willing to eliminate anything in my life that would keep me from following Jesus to the fullest extent of following Jesus. And so we have to reorder our habits of attention. What are we doing? We have to get serious about eliminating anything in our life that will cause us from really following Jesus into a new humanity. So the point that I want to make, the point that I want us to look at is this, is that freedom is found in removing access points that slave our hearts. Freedom is found in removing any access point that enslaves your heart. Lust is a heart issue. Greed is a heart issue. Anger is a heart issue. And we have to be willing to remove any access point that triggers those within our heart. Let's take a look at verse 31 and 32. Jesus said, "It was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce." That was their culture, that a man could just send his wife away, just say, I'm divorcing you, and that's it. Jesus said, but I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the reason of unchastity or adultery, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, this verse right here has been used a lot to shame Christians who have had a divorce. It's been used to force women to stay in abusive relationships. It's kept good men and good women from becoming ministers because they've been divorced. You know what amazes me? In some churches, in some circles of Christianity, you can have had multiple marriages before you got saved. But once you get saved, then if you go through a divorce, even if it's not your fault, you're no longer eligible for ministry. That is crazy, in my opinion. So what we have to do here, I believe Jesus is telling us to honor covenant faithfulness. It amazes me how many people stand at an altar before a preacher, make vows before God to stay committed in marriage till death do you part. And then when things get hard or things don't get easy, it's too simple, too easy just to say, well, we have irreconcilable differences. Really? No, what happens is we get selfish. One or both partners get selfish in a marriage and they stop working on it. They stop working together to make the marriage work. And relationships take work. It takes time. It is much easier to just give in to lust and desire for someone else, thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. The problem is we don't realize the mess that we create when we don't water our own grass. And so what Jesus is doing here is he is trying to get the men who held all the power in their society to honor covenant faithfulness. In Jesus's day, men treated marriage like a contract, like that they could void at will. If you want to divorce your wife, just give her away, give her a certificate, say, I divorce you. But that's the problem in their society, because women couldn't just go to work like they can in our society. They didn't have careers. They weren't able to go to school and get a college degree, and they did not have the freedoms that women in our society today had. And so Jesus was protecting these women by lifting the marriage back up to a covenant status. But today, the danger is different, because divorce is often normalized. Covenant is treated as optional. As a matter of fact, most people don't even see their marriage as a covenant anymore. It's a convenience. As long as we love each other, as long as we're getting along, then we'll stay married. But if it gets bad, we'll just get a divorce. And in our culture today, relationships have become disposable. It amazes me how many serious relationships teenagers have before they ever even get out of high school. It amazes me how many women, and again, this is not shame on anybody, but it amazes me how many men and women have a large number of children with different partners. It's for two people to wait until they get married to have sex and have children and live together. Nowadays, that's the exception when it used to be the rule. Again, I'm not putting shame out there. I'm not judging anyone or condemning anybody. If you're living together or you have children out of wedlock, or you're not even married to your spouse, to your children's mom or their dad, I'm not coming against any of that. I'm just saying our culture has changed. People are consumable, and we've got to get back to a higher standard if we really want to follow Jesus into a new humanity. So what does purity really look like? Is it where you don't have sex before marriage? Is it where that you don't live together before marriage? I know a lot of Christians put that as purity. I think that purity means resisting a throwaway culture and reclaiming the sacredness of promises made, whether in singleness, dating, or marriage. I believe that purity calls us to treat relationships as holy and not as replaceable. That when you make a vow to someone, that you take that vow seriously. And you commit to staying together, to working together, and make a marriage work. Now, I understand that sometimes that is impossible. Full disclosure, I've been divorced. I did not want to be divorced, but you cannot make someone stay with you if they don't want to. You can't make someone love you if they don't want to love you. And again, I'm not judging anyone or condemning anybody for going through a divorce or being divorced or making mistakes in their life. That's not what I'm here to do. But I am here as a minister, as a teacher, to call Jesus's followers to a deeper level of commitment. I'm here today to say that the divorce rate in the church should not be the same as it is outside the church. I'm here to say that Christians divorcing honestly should be the exception and not the rule. And again, there's no judgment. There's no shame. I'm just saying that as followers of Jesus, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. See, purity isn't just about being, let me say it this way. Purity is about being, not just resisting. Purity is about being, not just resisting. Jesus's vision and his teaching here isn't about shaming people that have been divorced or shaming people that have been through marital issues or relationship issues. It's about transformation. Jesus's issue here in the Sermon on the Mount is this: be the kind of person who sees others in a purity and loves them from a place of purity. In other words, they're not to be objectified. And in our culture, that's exactly what happens. Men and women, especially women, are objectified. And in our culture, which is a culture of empowerment and a culture of rights, purity isn't about repression, but it's about redirecting our desires to God's reality for those desires. Purity today in our culture is countercultural because it says freedom is not found in indulging every urge, but freedom is about aligning your heart with God. And I am not preaching purity culture. I am not preaching I kiss dating goodbye. I'm not going back to that. That messed up a lot of people. I am saying, though, that you can't throw purity out. You can't use it and throw it out like like many people have and just say anything goes. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Be pure. We're called to be pure as Christians, but that's to be pure in all areas. Purity frees us to love well, stay whole, and live faithfully. So let me wrap this up by giving you a couple of takeaways here. Purity is countercultural, and that's the kingdom. The kingdom of God is countercultural. In a world of disposability, instant gratification, and objectification, Jesus calls for us to be intentionally self-controlled. Jesus calls us to love in a way that honors God's design for humanity. And accountability really does matter, but both men and women must actively guard their hearts, their minds, and their bodies. Now, again, I know there's going to be some that take what I'm saying as I'm saying you can't wear certain clothes. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm not saying, again, I'm not preaching purity culture like it was in the 90s. But I am saying that Christians, followers of Jesus, need to be held. We need to hold ourselves to a higher standard where we love purely and we honor every single human being as an image bearer of God. We need to honor covenant over convenience. I'm saying that in all the years that I have ever done pastoral counseling with married couples, all of the or I won't say all, the majority of the couples that ended their marriage in divorce, most of them could have been saved if somebody would have just worked hard. If one or both of them would have worked a little bit harder, if they would have honored their covenant over convenience. Because love is more than a feeling. Love is commitment. Love is sacrifice. And love is integrity. And then lastly, we need to, as followers of Jesus, we need to have freedom in our restraint. Choosing purity, whether it's purity with our eyes, our hearts, our words, that's not legalism. It's a path to wholeness, freedom, and healthy relationships. Jesus said it this way: you might not have committed physical adultery, but if you lust after women, you've committed adultery in your heart. So it doesn't begin in the bedroom. It begins with wandering eyes and an unguarded heart. And I know that in today's culture, even this teaching is countercultural. All I'm asking for is followers of Jesus to honor your covenants, keep your eyes and your heart pure, and see every single human being not as an object to consume for whatever lust you might have, whether it's sex, power, control, whatever, but to honor them as an image bearer of God. I'd love to hear your feedback. Maybe you've got some comments. I would love for you to dialogue with me. And if you are ever in the Northwest Tennessee area, I would love to invite you to Renovatus Church. We meet every Sunday at 6 p.m. at 202 East Court Street in downtown Dyersburg. We meet at the Community Church's youth facility. You can visit our website, renovatus.org, or you can call that number on the screen. We would love to hear from you and have you come be a part. If you've enjoyed this, if you have been stirred by this, would you hit that like button, share it, subscribe? If you don't agree with me, that's fine, but let's Let's dialogue. Let's have a conversation. Until next time, I hope this has blessed you. I pray that you have an amazing revelation of the love of God, because he truly, truly is good, and he loves you beyond your wildest imagination. Until next time, God bless.